All right, so time for a new project. Friend of mine saw the Jazzmaster build that I did a year or two ago and wants something similar done for himself. So he's ordered some parts off of Warmouth. We have like a Strat style body, but with a swimming pool route. Talk more about this in future episodes, but the electronics are going to be interesting and not like a normal Strat. This is also not routed for a tremolo, so different kind of Strat. The neck also is interesting because it has a tilt back sort of blade headstock, and I think it looks really cool. It's also flame maple. We're gonna do another oil finish on this, so it's gonna be true oil again, this time with no stain underneath. And I think this flame maple is gonna really pop. And the rest of this video is going to focus on finishing this similar to how I did the previous guitar. So the first step is going to be to sand this, starting with 220 and then working up to probably 600 grit, and we'll show that now. So it's important that you sand things that you order from Warmouth, which is where this neck is from, before you try to put a finish on them, in my opinion at least, because these definitely have some kind of sealer on them that they've sprayed just to try and keep the wood from swelling or absorbing moisture when it's being shipped to you. So I'm going to start with a 220 grit sanding block that I've made out of this little rubber eraser. And we're just going to kind of work this pretty good along with the grain of the wood to try and take off that poly layer that's probably on this faintly so that our oil finish will absorb right into the wood. As far as other details on this neck, so you can see it's a tilt back headstock. This nice flame maple looks really cool. It's drilled for vintage style tuners, so it's going to be similar to the other guitar that I did. Probably link some of the videos for that as I'm showing this. And it is also a 12-inch radius neck, so more like a Gibson style, but the fender scale length of 25.5. And it also has this extra fret on it that will hang over the pick guard. And I'm just going to be really thorough. Really scratch this up at this 220. Probably don't need to show the whole thing. And then I'll step up, end up doing 320, and then on up all the way to 600 grit so that it's nice and smooth. So this is boring, so I'll probably skip ahead. So this is now sanded to 600 grit. Was careful to avoid sanding over the edges too much so that they don't lose their definition. You have to be pretty careful. And this is super silky smooth, and we're ready to move on to the next step. But first, we should probably clean it up. I've been touching this with my hands, which will get oil on it. And even though I've wiped it off already, the residual sanding dust can actually affect the finish. So I've thoroughly cleaned this whole area, wiped everything down, and vacuumed all of the dust that I produced. And I'm going to take this odorless mineral spirits, open it up, and then we're going to go ahead and wipe some of that onto the wood and then wipe it off to keep it clean. And I've just got a little bit of mineral spirits in a cloth. Go ahead and wipe it. And actually, this should give us a preview of what the finished neck should look like, which ought to look pretty good because this flame maple is pretty high quality stuff. Should have a good pattern. Yeah, so look at the figuring in that flame maple now that that has a little bit of moisture on the surface of the wood. That is the effect that we're hoping is really pronounced once we get the oil on. So that's pretty cool. I think this looks really good. And we will let this dry off for a few minutes, and then we'll be ready for our first coat of oil, and we can't smell any more of the mineral spirits. So this is dried off from the mineral spirits, nice and clean, and the surface is prepped for the oil. So this guitar does not have a binding. You can see that the wood of the rosewood fretboard goes right over to the edge here, and there's nothing at the edge stopping it. So I want to finish our true oil all the way up onto this edge of the rosewood. Some people may not do that. They may just like sand this smooth at the end and leave that edge bare. We're definitely not going to want to finish the surface of the rosewood though. We probably also don't want finish or too much of it anyway to end up going down into the truss rod route. So I'm going to mask off this front surface of the fretboard. We'll put masking tape with like a sharp line right at this edge, try to prevent as much oil as we can from going up onto it and getting on the fretboard. a little might get on there and we'll have to sand that off at the end anyway. So to do that, I've got this sharp fine line masking tape, and I'm just going to go ahead and run sharp lines right at that edge and mask everything off. And I might also just put a little bit to kind of cover and protect the nut part of the truss rod here, because we don't want finish to pile up in there and end up gumming that up and making it not move correctly. We are all masked off now. You can see that I've got a good line set over the frets, and then I've kind of like ran a tool to try and get as tight a grip at the edge of the frets as I can. You know, this isn't going to be a perfect mask job. You're really just trying to keep excess like runs from going all over the place on the fretboard. I'll probably still need to do a little touch-up work, and we'll be judicious with the oil application to try and keep that from getting onto that surface. So we are now all ready for the application of the first coat of True Oil. True Oil is this stuff. It's also called gunstock oil. You can buy it at like hunting stores and things like that. And this is a product that is a mixture of boiled linseed oil as well as some synthetic components and other stuff. And it's like linseed oil, but it dries harder and faster in my experience, and I really, really like it. Quick safety precaution with this. I'm going to be applying this by taking a rag. It's essentially like a piece of t-shirt. And then I'm just going to dab some of the oil into it and then wipe a thin layer onto the wood, and then we'll let that dry. I'm going to give it about 24 hours or overnight for each coat, but you might be able to get away with more than one coat in a day if you're really careful. But the safety precaution is that this stuff, as it dries and cures, will produce heat. So if you put this in a cloth and then have a whole bunch of these, because they go bad once you've used them, you throw them all in a wastebasket, you can end up with a fire. So be really, really careful using this or any other like drying oil type finish. So I'm going to do the front of the headstock first. That way we can then flip this over and do the rest of the neck. And we'll just take our True Oil, and I've used this before, so the cap is a bit gummed up and there's some kind of gunk. And I'll try and kind of clear all of that so that it doesn't get on the rag as we start. And should be good to go now. Don't get this on your skin, obviously, and be careful with it. Treat chemicals with respect. So just a little bit like that. I'm going to take this and just start to wipe it into the wood here. And we don't want like massive excess in our coats. I'm going to go right up against the edge of the nut there. A little bit. Being careful not to get it all over the nut, because we'll end up having to clean that off. And just wipe that in. And the first coat's going to go on kind of dry. The wood will kind of drink it. But this product lets you build up coats. The last guitar I did, if you've watched the videos that are probably linked in this video by now, I ended up doing something like 20 coats of this, which is kind of excessive, but I wanted like a really thick finish on it. Some people prefer less, like just a few coats, and then kind of like let it have more of a natural feel. But you can build up with this product, and it's a good protection for the neck, I think. And I am going to seal everything. The fit of this neck with the neck pocket is snug, but not like insane. So I've got a little bit of room to build finish around these edges. It's not like critical that I prevent any finish from going where the neck will meet the pocket. Yep. Right. So that is basically one coat of our True Oil. So again, with the safety, I'm going to take this, probably put it outside, someplace where it can dry and cure and not cause a fire. One other thing to note, you may have observed, though probably not, that down here there's a message. And what that message says is, warranty void if used without hard finish. Oils are not satisfactory. There's a lot of different things called oil finish, and they can be put on a lot of different ways. In my opinion, True Oil is more than thick enough if you build enough coats to provide a totally water-resistant finish, prevent the neck from warping, things like that. But if you are buying a part from this company, Warmouth, they will not refund you if your neck warps in the next couple of years and it's on warranty because you use this True Oil finish. So use at your own risk. I find it works fine. I've had a guitar for several years with it. It feels great and no problems. Anyway, that's one coat of this. So I'm going to leave this to dry. I will cover it with something to keep dust from settling on it. And I'll let it dry about 24 hours. We'll come back and see what to do after that's done. So the first coat has been on this for about 14 hours. I just let it sit overnight. And it's totally dry now. So again, you could probably try to do more than one coat in a day, but I just like to do one each day, nice and easy. And if I'm looking at this, everything's pretty good. The wood has mostly just kind of drank up that first coat. Like you can see there's a few spots where there's a little bit of sheen, but a lot of other areas it's pretty much flat. So we're gonna soak into the wood the first couple of coats and then we'll start building on top. I'm going to do another coat without any sanding or burnishing of this, so I'll just repeat what I just did before. Kind of exactly like the first, and hopefully we start to build up now. So there's another coat on. This one also is soaking in just a little bit, but you can see it starting to build up more of a sheen. Once this one dries, maybe we'll have to sand it back. But this process is just going to continue until we have quite a few coats build up, and I'll probably show one where I'm actually going to sand maybe some dust and things out, and then go ahead and kind of show the finish, because a little bit repetitive from here on out. Here we are with the second coat dried. It still feels like bare wood to some degree, but you can start to see that sheen happening. Now, the instructions on the True Oil say that between coats you should let it dry and then buff the surface with quadruple zero steel wool. I don't like to do that because it leaves a lot of debris everywhere and it's kind of hard to clean it off. Make sure you don't start sealing steel wool under the finish. So I have a little bit of P1500 sandpaper here. And this is really gentle. We're just going to kind of look for spots where there's maybe imperfections and take them out just a little bit before we put the next coat on. And you can see that we have some white marks. I'm actually going to switch to a softer cloth to try and prevent that. And also, and maybe I can get it to show up in the camera, there's a cat hair right here. So I'm going to focus on these areas, you know, like touching them up with this sandpaper. And just kind of try to work it back to a flat surface, not really like go too hard or anything, and just sort of take care of those problem areas. And then we'll wipe it really clear afterwards. And you can see that I've already sort of, I think I just knocked that cat hair off with just a few strokes. I'm just going to kind of level this just a little bit. And again, we're going to build up more coats over the top of this, and then we'll level a little more. And you can kind of repeat this process. You'll also notice that I've masked off the nut a little bit better because there's this kind of area where you can see some kind of tooling marks that were left here, right there. And I want to make sure oil is going to fill that in and not pile too much up against the nut. It's okay if a little bit goes up against the nut, but that mask will just help that from being like a well against it when we go to remove. So I finished sanding that, and you can see now, if I can get it to show, that that's a much more uniform surface, just fewer white marks, kind of things taken out, and the cat hair is gone. And so I've also cleaned this off really, really well because we don't want any dust. And now it's time for another coat of the True Oil. So I'll keep doing this process. I check between every coat. I sand the imperfections down, and then maybe every 3 or 4 coats do more of like a kind of like slight level sanding, again, just with really, really gentle sandpaper. It doesn't take much. And then we keep putting on coats as we did before, and repeat, and I'll show you what it looks like when we get towards the end. Now the neck here now has maybe 10 to 12, I think, coats on it, and it's okay, but I ended up with a little bit more in terms of like wipe marks on this than I was hoping for on the headstock. So, you know, this part really, like the playing surface is great, but for the rear and front of the headstock, and probably the sides, I'm planning to sort of level sand it down and relatively gently with starting with 800 grit, and then I'm going to work my way up you know, up to something that's very, very smooth. Best I can, get it nice and level, and then I'm going to do one final coat on it. And my reason for doing that is really just to try and get the best surface I can. I'm not looking for perfection. I mean, wipe on is wipe on, you know? And I've really not had success like buffing this stuff directly. Maybe with that sheen and a buffing, it could look a little better though. So I think we're going to get started. Let's start sanding. And this is 800 grit. Kind of really gently level this. Till we see a pretty level surface. And I'll repeat this on up. I'll say which grit I finished with. And this is the headstock up to 1500 grit. And I think I'm going to stop there. I don't want to wear too much off. And there are some shiny spots, but it's actually quite level if you're really looking at it up close. I'm just going to do an ultra light coat. And the idea is to get this one as perfect as possible. Maybe repeat it just a couple of times. Really try to not have any like cotton from the cloth get in. Try to avoid as much in the way of white marks as we can. Cover it up. Let's see what that comes back looking like.